What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy, that's Joe, and this is the Race Day Rundown.
NASCAR is in the desert, West Coast swing. Man, it's going to be a lot of action out there. But before we get started, join in on the action in DraftKings with us. We've got our league. If you want to do that and get in every week, we have that free contest. Drop your DraftKings tag below and we'll get you invited. But yeah, I'm excited for some short track action, Jeremy. We've seen a lot of mix of racing already. This gets us into a different style, different level. We haven't seen it since the Clash. Things have been cleaned up a little bit, or have they?
Oh, I would not say that. I think there's been more cautions through 3 races than probably in a while. I don't want to say ever because NASCAR is known to be crazy. Lots of cautions, though. I don't know if we're going to get that this week. I hope we do. Just because it makes things a little bit more exciting. But don't forget, this isn't just kind of a short track. It's a mile track. A little bit odd kind of shape, kind of kidney bean shaped, if you will. This is also a championship preview. So a lot of guys are going to be taking as many notes as they can here because this is going to be really big come November when we race here to find out who the champion is. I'm really, really excited about it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to unpack. And before we do, we've got a lot of things to go over. If you want to check out some of the stuff that we talk about, check out our race guide. That link is below in the comments. You can check out everything from a race preview to some key drivers and a driver pool that we put together every week. There's a lot of good information in there, but there's a lot of stuff to unpack. You want to talk a little bit about last week? Because I think that kind of sets the stage for where we're at today.
Yeah, let's start with the guy who won. I didn't plan on wearing this Bowman shirt quite this soon, but he backed his way into another win, and when he does that, I'm gonna wear the shirt. So kudos to that team. Obviously, if you didn't hear, Kyle Busch was not happy after the race. Said some things on the radio that were slightly out of bounds, but not over the line, I would say. Apparently they've kind of kissed and made up. I think they're all good there. But he was in position to win. He ended up having the best car kind of throughout the day, but especially late. If you don't get that late caution, Bowman's not winning that race. I had heard, I don't remember which podcast I was listening to. It was either Door Bumper Clear or Corey LaJoie's podcast, which is also a great podcast. Y'all should check that out. But one of those was mentioning that because Kyle Busch did not qualify, he had arguably one of the worst pit stall selections. So he was before all the Hendrick cars. He came in and they decided to go 4. That was supposedly the original call for the Hendrick cars until they saw him go 4. They audibled on the spot to 2 tires. That's what got them out in front, and that ultimately is what got Bowman the win, and Larson, I think, still finished second. So great day for Hendrick Motorsports on that front. But yeah, if Kyle Busch is able to qualify, doesn't have to start at the rear, gets a better pit stall selection, even with that caution coming out late, he might have still won the race. So it's turning out that all these little details that maybe we've kind of overlooked in the past or just kind of said, oh, that's not as important. That's important now. Who would have thought that a pit stall selection could cost you a race like that? I've never really thought of it that way, but that was amazing work by Hendrick Motorsports.
Well, Gibbs was no slouch that day either. You talk about Busch really being in a situation at the end where you thought he was going to win, and his Truex was his teammate, and he was right there. But before that, Denny Hamlin was really having a strong run, and he went through the gears a little bit backwards and didn't end a nice day for him, and he's in a pickle kind of now. Points-wise, he's got some work to make up. But those guys, they really had a strong run as a team, and, man, just had some stuff go wrong there at the end.
Really was frustrating Hamlin because I didn't plan on going too heavy on him, but in one of the contests I was in, I decided, I used our projections, and he was popping quite a bit. And so I kind of configured the numbers a little bit, got the lineups where I was happy with them, and I had good exposure to Hamlin. And it was looking really good. I was like, man, that's awesome. Because sometimes when you go through this sheet, you don't always know who's always the best play on DraftKings in particular because of the salary. You might think, oh, no, this guy's really good, but actually this guy, based on the money, what he allows you to open up the rest of the guys with, that's the better play. And I went with that, and it was looking good, like you mentioned. Let's hope that he doesn't make that same mistake in Phoenix, because he's going to be one of the guys to look for sure. But all in all, I thought Las Vegas was a really pretty solid race. It seemed like no one really just ran away with it completely. There was tons of lead changes, tons of passing. Guys were going to the back, still making their way back up to the front. All in all, I think going into it, I was kind of concerned hearing the way some of these teams were talking about how this car performs on 1.5 miles, and that it didn't seem to be quite there as good as it was on like road courses, etc. Looked great to me, man. If we can get more of that throughout the year on some of these, like imagine if this kart can open up Texas like that. Like Texas has been lacking a little bit. I love going there. Went there last year. It's fun. It's a great place to go and watch a race, but there's not always a lot of action up front, man. If we can get some of that from Vegas there, this car could really be the next gen, man. I'm excited for what we've seen so far this year.
Oh, I'm really excited. I think there's been a lot of different drivers that have looked dominant in different aspects of this next gen car so far, and in different stages in these races, you see guys that really kind of figure things out. Like Ryan Blaney last week, really, I thought he was in a really good position. We had him. I had him as a 10 in my impact score for the first time. I gave someone that, and he really was looking really strong, and just didn't end well for him.
Oh, he was the reason why I had a horrible day overall. I had a couple lineups doing okay, but he killed most of my prize picks. But I'm not mad that I played him. I'm mad that Brad Keselowski ran out of talent right in front of him and ended his day. Because really, Blaney did nothing wrong. He, like you said, he was looking good. I think he's a strong contender at Phoenix as well. He did get the pole. Obviously, we'll get into him and talk about him in a minute. Little things like that, man. It really kind of soured the day a little bit as far as our lineups went, because I was definitely heavy on Blaney too, and we had it. Just that's the thing about these cars, and what I do like about it's frustrating, but at the same time I love it. It's like these are definitely some of the best drivers in the entire world, and like on the last restart, Kyle Larson and Bowman, they're neck and neck, and Larson gets a little bobble, just a little bit. And we know he's one of the best guys. He won like 10 races last year in the championship. Slight bobble, and that cost him the win. Brad, going back to that, running, he was running decent, not a terrible day at that point. Just got loose. Car came around, and then obviously got smacked. So no lead, in my opinion, currently is safe. I know these guys will get better throughout the year, but man, with some of the tire issues we've seen, and just how loose these cars can get, those 1 second, 2 second leads, if you're able to get there, they're not safe.
Yeah, there's points are going to start becoming a factor. We'll start hearing a lot more about stage racing and things like that. It's still early in the season. A lot of things still left to play out, but there's a lot of things that are going to be impacted by people trying to figure out this new car, and now going into a race that is on a short track. I'm really excited to see how they handle this.
Before we move on to Vegas, or from Vegas to Phoenix, Chastain, man, dude, I did not see that coming. That one really did surprise me. He dominated. I think it was the second stage. He was. I'm not surprised to see him up towards the front. I know he's got the talent. I think Trackhouse. We've seen even Suarez already this year up towards the front. But dude, what was your thoughts when you were seeing that? Obviously, my initial thoughts were, wish I had more Chastain exposure.
That's what I was feeling, but at the same time, it's still early in the season, and I know that we talked about how much parity, and that just seems to be the catchphrase along with this next-gen car, and we're really seeing it play out week to week. We're seeing guys that are really good and talented lead laps, and so if that's the what's going to happen, we are going to start hopefully noticing some patterns of some of these drivers and teams in certain situations potentially getting some of these performance points and putting them away in races that traditionally they haven't been in and factored in very often. So this is going to be fun to kind of watch and track and see how it all plays out. But to me, I'm enjoying this new next-gen car because it's really allowing the drivers to show their true talents, I think.
It'll be interesting to see if we could potentially this year get more than 16 winners. We came really close last year, and I wouldn't say we had great parity last year, obviously, because Larson ended up with like a third of the wins practically. But with what we're seeing, I mean, Larson has been strong out here on the West Coast. Obviously got the win Auto Club really well at Vegas. But at no point, again, it's early, but at no point did it look like he was in the same situation of Larson from last year, where once he got the lead, boom, he's gone. You're not getting him. That has not been the case, and I think that's the best thing about this car is keeping everyone close. Everyone's in contention, and a slight mistake, even from the lead, could hurt you big time. Just ask Kyle Busch how many times did he have an incident making his way from the back to the front last week and then still led so many laps? It was a great race. I think Phoenix is also going to offer a lot of the same. A lot more laps, so a lot more performance points. I think it's time to get into Phoenix a little bit. I just said there's 312 laps in this race. It's a long race. Performance points are important here. 218.4 are up for grabs. I think this may be a little bit more spread out than what we've seen at some other Phoenix races. But still, you're going to have some of these lap leaders in your lineups because that's just a lot of points. The stages will break down into 60 for the first stage, 125 for the second stage, and then 127 for that last stage. At the time of recording this, we don't know if NASCAR will throw a competition caution. We didn't expect one last week at Vegas, and then I found out the cars were already on the track warming up was when I found out. So keep an eye out for that because that might change things up a little bit. In the case of if they do throw a competition caution, that makes me not want to fade Larson even more. We're going to talk about him in just a second, but he is going to the rear. At a track like this, you can get laps down early, so the fact if they do throw a competition caution, that makes me like him even more and less worried about him. And speaking of him, he was the last winner here, which won him a championship. So mostly due to his crew or the pit crew pulling out one of the fastest stops all year to get him that win in Phoenix last fall. Let's get into it, though. He is at the top of the salary board, $11,800. He starts 7th, scoring from 7th. I just said he's going to the rear. I still think he's going to have speed. Even if he's not up in the top 10 by the first stage, which I think he could be, there's a lot of laps after first stage. I mean, we just talked about how many there were. I'm at a 9 on Kyle Larson. I think he could be a really solid play here. I would imagine he'll be highly owned even with him going to the rear. But I'm not going to be all in on him, but I do like him.
I've given him an 8.5 with my impact score, and there's a lot to kind of unpack here because this is a track that is home to the championship. So he's looking to do well here. Everyone is, because it's test grounds for later in the season. Everybody's trying to learn something to take on further on into the season and apply it when it matters. So there's a lot to take into consideration here with some drivers having a lot more experience and this track tends to, at the end, have people or drivers that have a lot of experience towards front winning this race. So I think that's going to play a factor. Kyle Larson has a lot of experience, but also since this is kind of a short track, strategy is key because there are opportunities for these drivers starting in the back to go down laps early. And if there's a competition caution, that's going to open the door a little bit, but it's still going to be something where these cars are going to get in a lot of traffic. How clean air has been a factor already in some of the way these cars handle. It's going to play a lot into how far can these guys get back in the mess, and are they able to make their ways through? Yeah, some of these guys are going to have some fast cars. Larson in particular probably is going to make his way through there pretty quickly, but there's still a lot of traffic to get through.
Did you happen to catch why he was going to the rear? I know I saw like a tweet headline right before we started recording that he was going to the rear, but I didn't happen to see why. Were they changing out a big component or something?
They were changing something. I can't remember what it was, but they did switch something out, so he had to go to the rear. Regardless, we've seen drivers already in the that kind of situation. Kyle Busch last week really pay off the price tag that he was starting there. This is not a starting position.
Right, and kind of the reason why I'm asking is because they split the cars up again and practiced in two different groups, and he wasn't the fastest overall in practice for the one lap speed in his group, but he had the fastest, I believe it was 10, 15, and 20 lap average that compared to anyone who ran those. So as long as they're not really changing a motor, if it's a motor, then it's like, okay, that's a little bit more worrisome. Will they get that same speed out of it? But if it was another component,
it was a steering issue.
And he still was running some fast laps. So if they get that dialed in even more, I wonder if he's got something similar that Chase Elliott had, because he had a terrible qualifying lap. We'll get to him in just a second. But that is interesting. I still like Larson. I don't mind him starting at the rear. We've seen guys win this race from the rear before. No issue there. Let's get to the next Kyle Busch, starting 11th, 11,200. I'm at a 9.5, and one of the main reasons why I'm at a 9.5 is so far these races have been there've been so many things that have happened throughout these three races. We can remember some of them, but you just can't remember all the little details on what happened. So I wasn't necessarily planning on putting this out yet. I was going to wait until after this race, but I started pulling the numbers. I was like, this is enough here. So I have a new little metric that I'm including in the Garage Thoughts this week. You can find that on our Patreon. I think is going to be very helpful as we go on in the season, especially if we keep seeing this parity and we don't see just one guy completely run away with the season again. But when I started factoring in, okay, what kind of laps are these guys running as far as are they, on the lead lap, that kind of stuff. And then not factoring in place differential points, which are incredibly important. I mean, every position is a point or losing you a point. So it is
okay, Rick Allen. Okay.
Yeah, I know. It's way too early to be talking about points right now, but when your bankroll depends on it, I think these are kind of important. So when you just strip away the place differential points and you're just factoring in fastest laps, laps led, and finishing position, because it's, the old saying, it's not where you start, it's where you finish, right? So if you just factor that in and run that total against the laps that they have completed, Kyle Busch has been the best driver as far as driver earning you points. There's been a couple races where he's cost you some, where, he's drifted back, but he still has a positive 26 place differential on the season. Most of it came from last week, starting from 37th. That's why I'm not factoring that in. But that right there just shows me, despite Kyle Busch being in all of these issues, getting sideways with other cars, playing, just bouncing off of other cars, he's still performing for you. And we're coming to one of his best tracks. I was close to giving him a 10. I can't quite get there because I just can't quite get there with him. But, man, I do like me some Kyle Busch this week. I hope I'm not jinxing him like I did Blaney last week. We'll see.
Yeah, I like him as well. 9.5 is where I've landed with my impact score, because he is somebody that is in a nice position, has place differential upside. Like you said, he's able to pass cars. He's got a fast one himself. It doesn't matter what you do. I think this year, we talked about it earlier in the season, how this next-gen car and the composite body allows these drivers to really put their nose out there, and I think Kyle Busch is going to take advantage of it here, being a short track, and make pretty good moves to gain some positions for you and potentially pay off his price tag fairly easily since he does have some place differential. I like him a lot this week.
Before we move on, the last thing I'll say about Kyle Busch, and I just want to make this point because I think this really may play the rest of the season. The last few years before this season, he hasn't been that great. He's not the Kyle Busch that we know from basically his entire career before that. He's only won, I think, 3 races the last 2 or 3 seasons, which that's not Kyle Busch numbers. It can happen. I think a lot of that was the car package from last year, especially on the 550 horsepower package tracks like Vegas and things like that. The cars were just too... He needs power and he needs to be loose. That's when he really excels. And these cars I've already shown to be a handful. He's already pushed the limits. I don't think there's any driver who spun out more, just lost the rear end of the car. Even going back to testing at Daytona and stuff. I think this car, once he really gets comfortable with it, it might really be bad for the rest of the competition because I think it does kind of suit his style and his skill set. So that's the last little thing I'll say about him. But another solid play, mostly in my opinion because of the starting position, Chase Elliott, 10,700, starts 19th. All his teammates qualified in the top 10. They all made the last round. He did not. His run did not look good. He looked real tight. I don't know if it was just a bad setup or what. He looked pretty good in practice. He had solid practice numbers. So the fact that you're getting Chase Elliott at a track he's won at and is decent at, and with the speed that his teammates show at 19th, seems like a pretty solid play in my opinion. Where are you at? Oh, I'm at 9.5. Where are you at?
Oh, I'm at a 9.5 as well because I think everything you just said really is what he's going to look to try to achieve this week because this is where he has to set himself up mentally to be at the end of the season for a championship. So I think he's going to come and approach it kind of in that mindset. So I'm looking for him to have a strong performance. With that poor qualifying run, you get a lot of place differential, and he is somebody that if he can make it through the traffic, competition caution helps him if that does come around. I like him there at that position and that price tag. There are a lot of drivers we're going to talk about, but before we do, check out our race guide if you want to see our scores for all the drivers because trying to get this out here and let you get our thoughts on most of the drivers, but we can't touch on everyone. But if you want to see our impact scores for all of them, check out that race guide. The link's below.
Yeah, this week these are our featured drivers. We're going to mix it up. And I don't know, it's just a little more fun that way, I think. You just get to really highlight a few more people, spend a little bit more time with certain drivers, going over why we really like certain scores or whatnot. Next guy that I want to talk about is Denny Hamlin, even though he screwed us both last week. 10,100, starts second. In practice, I didn't see a lot out of him. I was like, man, I think he's a little off. I was thinking might even have a little trouble getting into that top 10. But, man, they did something to that car, and he threw down some fast lap times in his qualifying runs. Got second, outside pole. He's pretty good here, too. I don't like him quite as much as some of the other guys we've already talked about, but I'm going to give Hamlin a 9, and I will try to have some exposure to him because the Gibbs cars have looked good. And, look, he had a mental error last week with the shifting. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens again, but I would be surprised if it happens to him again. I don't think he'll make that mistake.
Yeah, I hope not. I've given him an 8.5, though, because that's a pretty price tag for someone starting second. He's got a lot of upside being able to dominate this race. He's been in a good situation, but there's so many drivers and so much parity this season. This early, I don't want to have all my eggs in one basket with a dominator. So I don't want to have too much exposure to him, but I do want to have him sprinkled throughout.
I completely agree with that, and I will try to follow that to the best of my abilities. But this next driver, he's getting a 10 from me. And that driver is Martin Truex, 9,800. He starts 20th. Look, practice did not look that great. Qualifying did not look that great. But his teammates all qualified pretty well, had fast times. He won this race last year in the spring. He runs really good in the spring. He almost won the championship here. If that caution doesn't come out late in that race, Larson doesn't have an opportunity, and that pit crew doesn't have an opportunity to get him the lead. So don't forget about that. Like, I think he had that one in the bag. Like, Denny Hamlin wasn't catching him. Chase Elliott, I mean, like, he was almost a champion, two-time champion, if that caution didn't come out. I like him a lot. Like I said, I'm at a 10. A lot of it is just because he's starting 20th. He has the potential to lead laps. I don't know if he gets there, but, man, if he gets a top 5, that's solid. He didn't even need a top 5, really, but I think he's a top 5 potential, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've given him a 9.5 because of what you just said. Really, you got to look at this from an angle of a lot of the guys that are going to be in this at the end, I believe, have championship experience. They know how to be at the end, especially in this style of racing. So I'm looking for him to have a big impact getting through traffic. These new cars, this composite body, I'm looking for a lot of fun action, and I think he's going to be one of the more aggressors in this race, looking to score a win early and lock himself into a playoff position. I like him a lot. A lot of pass to value with the 20th place. Dude,
He's solid.
lock him in.
He's solid. So I kind of feel like the next two guys on the DraftKings salary board they're similar plays, but they're also different. Ryan Blaney, 9,600. He starts first. He looked good in practice. Obviously, he qualified well, got the pole. The guy below him, William Byron, 9,400, starts third. So very similar price tag. He also looked fast in his group. In his practice group, he had the fastest 10, 15, and 20 lap average, I believe. So a little bit maybe better long run car than Blaney. We obviously will find out come race time. I'm at a 9.5 on Blaney, and this is just one of those situations where if you're going to be successful, in my opinion, at DraftKings or Prize Picks or whatever you're doing, you got to have a short memory because, like I said, we got burned by Blaney last week. It was looking good before that, but here he is again in another great position to lead laps, get a lot of those performance points. He's pretty solid here. Between the two, who you leaning more towards, Blaney, Byron, or are they almost the same?
I've got them both at 9.5 because I view them really in the same boat. You can get a lot of fastest laps. Guys up the front really are able to rack up that category. And then typically, the guys starting at the front, first, second, third, they're fighting back and forth leading laps. So you can get some performance points from both of these guys. It's just going to be who gets the long lead or the long run ability and leads those laps. I want to have a mix between the two. So I think either way you go, you're probably going to have pretty good success. But, man, we've seen Blaney be fast early. We just haven't seen Byron have the finishes, but he has been fast.
Yeah, they're both really good. I'm going to lean Blaney a little bit. I will give Byron a 9 for my impact score. But having exposure, mixing it up between those two, I think is definitely a good move here. I also plan on having some exposure to the guy has the most wins here all time. Kevin Harvick, 9,100, starts 16th. You're getting I don't know if he's going to get up front and lead. I just haven't quite seen the speed out of the 4 car. I've seen some of the speeds out of his teammates, which is backwards from last year. I don't know how this is happening. Maybe it's just taking him a little bit longer to get used to it. Maybe a track like Phoenix, somewhere he can get in a groove, lots of laps, lots of opportunities to work on the car. Maybe that's what he needs. But if he's able to get in the top 10, I think that's a solid value for Harvick, and might even go a little bit lower owned than he should.
Yeah, I've given him a 9. I think he's in good position and has place differential. He's not starting too far back to get in the mess. So I think he's somebody that you can lean on in pretty much any environment.
So we'll talk briefly about last week's winner, Alex Bowman. Comes in 8,700. He's 9th. Statistically not a great track for Bowman. I could still see him performing fairly well, but personally I don't think I'm going to end up there that much. But after last week, I definitely plan on having at least one Alex Bowman lineup. I'm not going to get burned by not having him again, but ultimately I'm going to give him a 6.5.
Yeah, I'm going to give him a 7. I think he's got a good upside, and he's starting in the top 10, so he doesn't have to pass a lot of cars and is in a position where He could be sneaky, but I think a lot of people might go that way since he's last week's winner. Could field a lot of ownership.
All right. Someone I did not expect to have a great practice or great qualifying, but he kind of surprised me. Tyler Reddick, 8,500, starting 12th. The reason why I say that, we all kind of know he's a rim rider. This is not a rim riding track. But, man, he had some fast laps in practice. He did qualify 12th. So he just barely missed out on making that the last 10, the second round. But I'm in an 8.5. I think he's – look, I mean, if he keeps it clean, he seems to be like a threat to get fastest laps and even laps led every week in this car. I like what I'm seeing out of that 8 team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've given him an 8.5 because he is somebody that can be a little bit more aggressive at times, and I think this style of track and this car in particular aligns with his style really well. Starting 12th, he's got a little bit more upside with place differential than Alex Bowman. I'd trust him a little bit more with my money this week.
So we kind of talked about him a little bit earlier in the episode. The next driver that we're going to talk about is Brad Kay. 8,200. He starts 18th. Hopefully he doesn't run out of talent because a talent again like he did last week, because this is a pretty good track for him and they need a good run from that team. I'm at an 8. I can see it working out. I just don't quite know after these last couple races if they're there. I mean, when you're talking about, like Daytona, anyone can really look good there with the draft. He really looked good, really strong there. But you kind of look at some of these other races, you're like, I can see it, but also I can see they're off a little bit. I know they're working hard to get that dialed in. I might try to get a little exposure because 18th starting position is nice, but I just don't know how much he's going to really move up in this race.
Yeah, I've given him a 7.5 because I kind of lean that same way. I think he's got some upside for sure. I just don't know where they're at as a team and an organization, but he does have upside being that he's starting 18th and he's not marred in traffic. So him and Ross Chastain at 8,100 starting 17th are in very similar positions. I think I'd lean Brad a little bit more than Chastain. I think Chastain might have a little bit more ownership because how much he stood out last week, but he could be in a position to pay off pretty easily.
Right, and this track is very different than Las Vegas, so just because they had a great run last week doesn't obviously not mean they're going to have a great run here. There's really no similarities between these tracks. Wouldn't be surprised to see him have a good run, but I don't really expect that, so I'm at a 7.5. So yeah, if I'm picking between Brad or Chastain, I would go with the little bit more experienced Brad. But the next guy that we're going to talk about has been technically the best DraftKings play practically every week, and he's got the most DK points out of all these other drivers, even Kyle Busch. Eric Almirola, 7,900. He's got some really good track history here at Phoenix. The downside this week, or maybe it's not, maybe you see it differently, but starting 5th. He's been starting in positions where he's got a lot of PD upside. Only driver with 3 top 10s so far. I'm at an 8. I still kind of think he could do well here, but not as juicy as the last couple weeks.
Well, I think he's in a nice position starting where he's at, but with that price tag where he's in that top 10 mix and he's fighting for place differential some of the other performance metrics, not place differential as much, but he is there in that mix trying to stack up those performance points, and I think you can find some value there with him. I've given him a 7.5.
I mean, just think about this. I mean, he threw down a faster lap than Kyle Larson did in that qualifying round.
And finishing position this week is going to be really one of those key things that you're going to want to watch out for, and he's, like you said, been consistent this week or this year so far. So if he's able to get another top 10, that's pretty solid.
Right. Someone I don't know if he's going to get the best finishing position, but based on his starting position, he doesn't have to finish that well. Ricky Stenhouse, 7,000, starts 36th. Was looking okay in practice. Nothing. He probably wouldn't even been on our radar had he qualified, but because they've had some sort of engine issue where they felt they needed to change out the engine completely, they did not get to make a qualifying run. So he's being scored from last. I wouldn't say this is one of Ricky's better tracks, but he can do okay. If he's able to sneak into the top 20, which I think that car is capable of, even starting that far back, you're talking about really good value. Obviously, I'm a little reluctant. We know Ricky's nickname, but I'm going to have to give him a 9 here. I mean, he can only really move up or stay the same.
Yeah, I've given him an 8.5. I think he's got a lot of upside. Just kind of worried that he's starting so far back, could get caught up in somebody else's mess. But at the same time, he's got a tremendous path to value with that place differential upside.
Someone that we have a little bit of a gap between our scores, and we're pretty tight with most of our scores with these guys. But Chris Buescher, 6,700. He starts 26th. I'm at an 8. You're only at a 6. I see this being top 20 for him. And at that price tag, that's really good. And he's got Roush power. He's got, the same car that Brad has. I'm liking him, but what is your reluctance on Chris Buescher?
I think he's just one of those guys that you can pretty much from here on down find a copy and paste job, and there's other salaries that might help you to pay up for some drivers that you're looking for. I think there's guys below him that just offer the same finishing position upside, just at a cheaper price tag. So I've given him a 6 because there's just other drivers, in my opinion, this week.
All right, so let's talk about the next 3 drivers basically as one, because I see them kind of as one play, although you may end up having to have 2 of these guys in your lineups, especially if you're going to go real heavy. Obviously, we're getting into the cheaper guys, but I like all of these plays. You got Bubba Wallace, 6,400, starting 27th. You got Cole Custer, 6,200. He starts 25th. And then Justin Haley starts 6,000, starts 28th. I see them all as guys who can move up here. I would say, based on track history, in my opinion, Cole Custer's got the better track history, even though it's less than Bubba has. Not a great track for Bubba Wallace, but starting 27th, I mean, that's a top 20 car just based on the equipment, in my opinion. I'm at an 8 on Bubba. I like Custer a little bit more, 8.5. And then Haley, I mean, he's got the best PD potential out of all of them and the cheapest. I'm at an 8. I know we're kind of bunching them all together, but did any one of these guys really stand out to you?
I've got out of those 3, Cole Custer ranked the highest with a 7.5. We've seen both of his teammates, Almirola and Briscoe, qualify fast. His other teammate, Kevin Harvick's won here 9 times. I think he's somebody that has equipment, and the teammates are giving the team enough information that he can dial it in a little bit more. He's been fast here before. I like him. I think out of those 3, that's who I lean on the most. All
right, so we got 2 guys left that we're going to talk about. But honestly, there's a few other guys down here that I think work out in lineups. I mean, really, this whole slate is completely open. You can make, like I said, right now until we figure this out, or unless teams really figure this out, there's literally no bad play here. It might not work out, You might play a Briscoe starting 6 and it just doesn't work out, but it also might work out and nobody's going to have him. Ty Dillon, he starts 21st, 5,900. We talked about just how he's kind of just Mr. Consistent, just getting good, solid finishes. I think he's going to work out nicely with some of these more expensive guys. I got to give him a 7.5. I'd rather have a little bit more PD from him, but I think he can get a top 20 for sure, maybe even a top 15.
Yeah, and I think he's somebody who's been really consistent throughout this season so far. He's finished 100% of the laps, and he's somebody you can lean on, I think, and Mr. Consistent, like you said. I've given him an 8.5.
All right, last guy we're going to talk about. It was kind of funny because I've overlooked this guy, and when we were doing our projections, I said, hey, I think this, I threw down kind of what I thought, and you're just immediately like, why are you going to give this guy so many points? And then you go look back at the race results, and you realize Corey LaJoie already has 2 top 15s this year, but he has not looked necessarily that great. But it's not always where you start. It's not always how you do in the mid-race. It's how you finish, and he's getting it done. He's 5,300, and he's starting 30th. Obviously, that's in that range where things can go wrong. He could go a couple, lap down early, which could really hurt him the rest of the day. But, dude, that's so cheap, and with how that team has been performing in this new car, I got to give him an 8.
I've given him a 6. I just don't know how much you can trust somebody starting 30th in a situation where he's at, where they're not always the most well-funded team. I think that there are other plays this week that's, like you said, is wide open. I don't think there's really anybody too far down the list that you can look at, but there are so many drivers available this week. And if you want to check out the full list of drivers and all of our scores, check out our race guide below. That link's in the comments. This has been fun, Jeremy. Another week of doing this. We're getting more and more data. Who wins?
That's tough. I've been really bouncing around between a few different drivers. I'm going to go with I have to go with my 10. I'm going to go with Truex.
All right, I'm going with Ryan Blaney. So we'll see how this plays out, but I think it's going to be a great race, short track action in the desert. This has been a lot of fun, and I am excited to see how this ends, but for the DK Garage...
Well, hold on. One thing I want to mention before we... because we hadn't really talked too much about this. When we get our Price Picks numbers, when we get them released, we put them in our Garage Thoughts, the opening numbers. And the reason why I'm doing that is, a reason why I'm mentioning that is that's how they opened up. Last week we saw Kyle Larson, I think, open up at 55.5 total points, and by an hour or two before race, he was already up to 68.5 points, projected points. Keep an eye on what Price Picks is doing leading up to the race. Compare them to our projections. You'll see it, laid out real nice. But obviously, I already told you Blaney kind of ruined some of mine. But I actually hammered a few Larson unders based on that movement, based on our projections, and it hit. It hit. Also, Kyle Busch went over by a lot, but and his numbers didn't really move too much. So that's something that I think that I'm going to really be paying attention more this week. If you guys want to get in on the action and you don't already have a Price Picks account, sign up, use promo code GARAGE, and we will match your initial deposit up to $100, 100%. So it's free money. Get in on it. And I think right now that's almost really where I'm going to be focusing on this week, because having 6 guys finish a race right now and figuring out who that is on DraftKings has been proven to be very difficult. So if I can get with just 2 or 3, maybe I'll have a little bit better luck.
I'm glad you stopped me, because that is definitely one of the things that has been a benefit, is being able to add Prize Picks to the mix and being able to continue to grow the bankroll that way, because not as many drivers needed to build a lineup there. But man, I'm so excited to get down, build a few more lineups, and sit back and watch this race. So let's not keep these guys anymore from that. For the DK Garage, I'm Joe, that's Jeremy, and we'll see you next time.